I am the cloud advisor for Microsoft product, that is for Azure and M365 and security. Firstly, thank you all for coming in so that we can talk about the modern workplace and the offerings by Microsoft that we can leverage to encompass the goal of the business to attain the highest level of security in the modern infrastructure. During this uh, event, if you guys have any questions, please park it over the chat box and I'll be happy to address them as and when I toggle back and forth on the screen. And if anyone of you wants to have a deep dive technical session on any of the topic that has interested you, I'll be happy to engage again the next time to drive this technical session. So let's begin and see what this session is all about and what is modern workplace. Now, it is not new for the industry to change over the period of time. All right. We have seen change in the industry, we have seen change in the technology, and recently, all thanks to pandemic, that has actually pushed back all of the frontline workers and the staff back to home and work from the place they are. Now, that means the business and the employees has to work now in hand for a common goal to ensure that the data are in strictest confidence. The availability of the resources, the app, and the infra is also placed in an environment that is secured and highly available. Back in old times, talking to your peer was pretty simple, right? You dial a phone, you talk to them, you share a document, boom, the transfer is done. All right. But then today we are talking about effective collaboration and extending our work with different applications that are available for the business to use. Like today, we are connected over Zoho, all right, which is a collaboration tool for conferencing. All right. If I were to share a file over the chat box, first thing that I have to consider about is the security, the availability, and how this tool will actually help us to be effective and productive. Now, we don't have to worry about the underlying infrastructure of what goes beyond the hood. All right, since from the user's perspective or from the partners or from the business perspective, we are the front end guys receiving the data on the application level and understanding how it should work. For example, all right, the first thing that I do when I get up in the morning is to check my calendar on my phone. The next thing that I do, I turn on my laptop and see my mails, and it goes, right? So the identity, okay, that is being used on two different platforms, that is on the phone and on the laptop, is the same. The exchange of communication is different. That's what we need to actually understand, how the modern security will help us to attain all the goals using different platforms. We all come from the native and the traditional on-prem directory environment where, to safeguard the interest, the basic purpose of the directory was to actually store the username and password, which has surpassed the thoughts of all the evangelists by saying the fact that the new Active Directory has boatloads of services and security to offer itself. Now, considering about the cloud-based solution that is Azure Active Directory, okay, it has a lot to offer, like privileged identity access, just-in-time access. Those access are actually demanded when there's a need in the business. Now, if we talk about the traditional IT and the cloud offerings, all right, then it actually becomes what in a simple language is nothing but the modern IT. However, I may emphasize this way. Let us talk about hybrid environment. That's what the entire business is today. They have their on-prem facility, and then you have the resources spent over cloud. But what is that we need to consider when we talk about the hybrid environment or adoption of the cloud? Let us talk about now application modernization. What do we mean by application modernization? We may think of software as service. We may think of publishing an app over the web that can be accessed through REST APIs or leveraging the web protocols like HTTP or HTTPS, maybe your VDI environment. All right. Back in the old days, we had this classic native uh, deployment done, and then the control of that application was done onto the same intelligence itself by the app, or the developer may have done some added security to ensure that it won't get compromised if published over the web. However, as the industry has progressed to software as solution as service, all right, that's where the entire future of the app lies. Today, everything is being transacted over the HTTPS URL. Okay. Now, considering the fact that the workload that we're trying to use, all right, are in a traditional environment, how would you think that you will be able to access your file services, your storage, or maybe your roaming profile, all right? When we talk about roaming profile in the cloud-based environment, a, a service or a function, let me put it this way, all right? Let's leverage the FS logics that can be leveraged to actually ensure that the roaming profiles are being stored in a secure environment using FS logics that can actually help you to eliminate the traditional task of having the file share dumped onto the user profile itself. All right. Now, securing the environment with what we have is something that we all have seen, all right? But then how effective we have leveraged those solutions is what is the considerable amount of thought. We have a lot of things in our environment. We have the firewall appliance, we have the AV, that is your antivirus appliance, we have the application intelligence itself. But then how do you think that can be controlled over? Because to control, you need to have some sort of mechanism and some sort of understanding of the app itself. For example, yeah, I'm speaking to you guys over this webinar, and I'm actually accessing my email on my laptop, and I have my phone handy. All right, so that one identity is spun over onto three different platforms. For example, we all heard about the MDM, right? That's modern device management, something called as Intune. Now, that Intune, the app that is hosted over the web in your enterprise environment, that app itself can control what you actually want the user to behave. Let us go back, right? When BlackBerry announced their flagship phone, Z phone, right? I was so fond of BlackBerry that I had purchased that phone just for one good reason, to see how they have uh, introduced the two different profiles, that is the work profile and the personal profile on the phone. Mind you guys, I think it was BlackBerry. No comments on that if someone else has had actually introduced that technology. All right. So that's what I want to lay emphasis. All right, we had this in the industry, all right, from good long time, but then now we are anticipating it to be the part of the design. Now, Intune gives you the ability to control the behavior of the user over the phone or on the desktop app itself. Now, the applications that are hosted over the web, right? Since we're talking about the M365 offering, the landscape of the service is pretty robust and versatile. All right. We need to actually match the user's expectations with the business goal. And we need to also modernize the way the app behave. For example, let me actually give you a quick insight about the enterprise app registration that the Azure Active Directory has to offer. All right. Now, if I tell you using now, for example, you may have any app on your on-prem environment, then you want to actually leverage the same over the Azure Active Directory. Using enterprise app registration, you can register the app itself and let the AD, that's your Azure Active Directory, authorize your sign-on, and you don't have to worry about accessing those apps again. Now, the mentioning of this statement, one size has never fit all, is something that every uh, business stakeholders from the business goals perspective and from the technology platform perspective has to define and draw a line, because you may have something, for example, all right, we know that M365 has a lot of subscriptions to offer. Your Exchange Online, your M365 E5 license, the license that I actually personally use for my functioning, all right, that license has both loads of services like Intune, and then you have conditional accesses that can be applied in your environment. Those work like your ACL, okay, that can be used to ensure that you give the access to the right person who actually validates himself and does not masquerade his identity. Mobility is the new normal. Nowadays, everyone is mobile. Every workload is mobile. Yeah. You tell me I'm actually resetting a user's password on my phone. Back in the old days, it was kind of a bit daunting and tedious task that won't let you do so, because first thing first, the authentication. Second thing is the identity. The third thing is how about the data getting compromised? But over the cloud environment or over the new offerings of the Microsoft, the landscape has changed completely. You would see it changing drastically once you start adopting it. Okay, for an example, on a traditional on-prem environment, we know that the Active Directory is a gold mine, I would say, for somebody who actually wants to gain information, because that's where everything is housed. Your user identity, that's your first name and the last name. And then if you were to safeguard an asset, then you will have to make that device join the AD and then push the group policies onto that devices and then safeguard the environment. Yeah. However, over the cloud, the change is every day, because I am a firm believer. The only thing that is constant is change. What is driving the change in the modern environment? It actually revolves around the four major elements. They are nothing but your user, devices, apps, data. Okay. When we talk about users, they are nothing but you and me. What are devices? The ones that I carry in my phone, I mean, in my pocket, that's my phone, my machine, that's my laptop, and my tablet, all right? So the apps that we use in our dailies, like your Outlook, your Microsoft Word suite, and the data that is actually being exchanged, that is what we need to actually govern and safeguard from your uh, sophisticated attackers, I would say, because as the industry is changing, the attack surface is also getting advanced, and there are a lot of new tools being introduced in the market, all right, by these guys to make your environment go crazy. Don't forget about the DDoS that can actually ensure that the worker or the app can actually go mad if that bombard has been done onto that server. The goal of doing the DDoS, as you guys know, that is not to make money or not to actually put any sort of restrictions onto the environment, but just to ensure that the services are disrupted. With the modern workplace security, all right, keep fourth thing in my most important and in your mind, I would say it is your mobile device and application management. It is about the access information and the virtualization. And last but not the least, the hybrid identity. Because today we are in the era of using the hybrid cloud. The solution is changing differently. The approach of security from a zero trust, from the zero trust model. Nowadays, we ensure that you validate somebody, all right? You don't rely on the cache credential. You don't rely on one single mechanism of authentication. When I say not relying on single mechanism of authentication, I mean your multi-factor authentication, MFA. All right, and in MFA as well, you have two-step verification done. Once you sign on your username and password, you have a text code on your phone, and thus you actually validate that you are who you are actually supposed to be accessing the workload. Now, since the time this pandemic has forced the entire staff or the first line workers to be in-house, uh, exchanging data, availability of the resources, the asset management has become daunting and tedious. But all thanks to this new offerings, you can still have the governance in place because we are nowadays, as I mentioned, using the Intune, that's your mobile device management for safeguarding your platform. Now, the productivity has not affected. This is from my experience because you can actually push the web apps and just ensure that you host the session and let the end user access it over the internet. Now you don't have to worry about shipping those assets, the beefy machines to the customers or the end users and incur your logistics, your inventory expenses. Just ensure that you put it over the web, use the virtualized environment, and have the resources access. One user, one identity everywhere is what I'm actually affirmative of all about this aspect of the availability of the resources, identity management, and the desktop virtualization. We're going to talk about it when we progress over the portal. If time permits, I really want to actually take you to the portal and show how this environment can be secured from a central point of management and how you can gain the visibility. Now, when we talk about desktop virtualization solution, right, back in the old days, I would say it's still nothing gets old, guys, because they are worth being old so that they can become gold in the near future. That's what it is. Yeah. So your terminal server, your RDS connection was the giant in the market that actually helped you to virtualize your workload over the cloud. With the new offering, you have something called as WVD. That's nothing but a virtualized concept again, offering the Windows-based solution. The thin line is here. You don't have to have the RDS licenses cal purchase for your virtualization, and you don't have to buy a server operating system by investing more amount of money onto your environment. You can virtualize the app. You can virtualize everything. You can have concurrent session. The beauty is you can do it all by yourself. I wouldn't say all by yourself, but the help of the IT engineer for sure. But then you can leverage the Windows-based operating system that is nothing but the client-based operating system that's nothing but your Windows 10 itself. Desktop virtualization using WVD, okay, it is from my experience, it gives you the same feature, the same richness, and the efficiency of the management because you're not relying on your physical asset. back in the old days, all right? If your hardware goes down over here in the virtualized environment, you can swap the profile, put it on another pool, and thus you make sure that the users can access the resources onto the pooled environment. The scalability is pretty seamless, all right? Moreover, it gives you the room to focus on the efficiency rather than being worried about the hardware, the underlying maintenance, the overhead, and the capital expenditure. The modern workplace is all about modern expenditure management, and that is nothing but your operational expenditure bucket. When we talk about enterprise mobility suite, as I mentioned nice earlier, it actually revolves around four major elements. They are identity, apps, data, and users. When you have an hybrid identity, that means you have a user from an on-prem. Those accounts are being synchronized using a tool that is AD Connect, and credentials are not pushed onto the cloud for security reasons. That's one way you can have your identity being synchronized and termed as hybrid. For your mobile device application management, that's MDM or MAM itself, you have the Intune to actually ensure that you give the right access as defined by the role. That concept comes from the role-based access model. Over that, you have your privileged access from this Azure Active Directory. Don't forget, guys, adding the source just-in-time access. That means with everything in place, you still have more room to play with security. Access information, it is nothing but it comes from the same family of right management system. By using AIP, that's access information protection, you can label the criticality of the document and ensure that you give that document priority and preserve it with some lock or keys. Enterprise mobility solution, as I mentioned, when we talk about identity and access management, it is nothing but the Azure Active Directory to safeguard the entity and the behavior. Well, the advanced threat analytics can be more often power or enforced to mitigate the risk, once identified. And then your good friend, that is nothing but the Intune, the mobile device management. Back then you have Pulse as well. Now, when we talk about Intune, all right, I just want to actually talk about one simple thing, guys. Now, it is the complete suit, no doubt about it, because I've known that I've actually designed the environment for hedge funds, US-based companies. All right, I won't reveal the name of those environment for the NDA that I have. Okay, but at the same time, when we talk about this device management, well, they are. If you were not to using M365, you will have to have some different vendor being invited to your environment, different ways of configuration to be done in the environment. What I'm trying to convey is here, guys, if you are bringing something in your environment, additionally, within or without the ecosystem of Microsoft environment, you are exposing your environment to the public by opening up the ports required by that app itself. Well, I know that can be secure. However, the point that I actually want to convey here, let's leverage what you have. Let's use them to the optimum level of utilization so that you can ensure that you stay where you are with your design budget limit and make all of the services being used to ensure that you achieve the business goal, that is the length and the breadth of the security. When we talk about the mobile productivity challenge, it is not a challenge nowadays. Yeah, it was once upon a time where You had no control of what you were actually doing. But today, as I'm actually walking back and forth, left and right, center, yeah, the security is actually following me because my identity has been synchronized and actually, as we all know, using that single sign-on concept, the token is actually being authenticated, and yeah, it's been understood by the behavior pattern. You have the audit logs that gives you the visibility that how, when, and what platform was being used to access any app or any of the corporate resources. That gives more control to the ID administrator and the security engineers to understand the pattern of the sign on. Thus, they can identify the risk and mitigate it. The deployment of scenarios may always differ because we are not criticizing, but then opposing the statement one size fits all is not the need. For somebody who actually wants to protect the data on files app and devices, what is that they should be worrying about or leveraging from the suite? First thing first, Azure Active Directory. Then you have the MDM, and then you have Cloud App Security. It is nothing but a portal where you can actually gain the complete insight of your environment, and then the operating system and the productivity application. Same goes with somebody who wants to just detect and protect against external threat. What are you adding to? Well, the advanced threat analytics, Azure information protection, and then you have those Exchange client and client access services. Same goes with another two more case scenario where if you just want to protect your users and their accounts, well, you have the same coming from the suite. AD, that's Azure AD, into CASB, AIP, Office Pro Plus, and Office application. Work anywhere, walk anywhere, let the data get exchanged anywhere. You don't have to worry about the management anymore. Because as I mentioned, using AIP, that's your Azure Information Protection, you can encrypt I wouldn't say encrypt, but then put in lock onto the file, and the one who has the same level of permission can decrypt it, thus ensure that your data has been accessed by the legitimate person. Managed email and productivity, as I mentioned, the landscape of the security revolves around the four major elements. They're nothing but the identity, device, app, and data itself. Using AIP, I can ensure that I can ensure that the data, that is the attachment, is safeguarded. With the use of Azure AD, or privilege identity management, I can add on some more security to the entity. Using MDM Intune, I can ensure that the user actually access the application in a corporate environment and not in a personal environment. Conditional access gives you more area to play with security. They are nothing but some if and then statement for permit and deny. For somebody, all right, let me put it this way. When we talk about mobile application mentioned, as I spoke about, the Intune will ensure that you only open up what has been required to be accessed in your corporate environment, that is your corporate app space and not the personal space. Well, those are nothing but the managed apps pushed by your Intune administrator from the cloud to your phone, and thus that device is now being governed by the IT administrator. And then it draws a line that your corporate data is onto a different profile as opposed to your personal data. That gives you more control over copy paste of data or integrity. All right, those are the three pillars like confidentiality, availability, and integrity. Using everything in place can actually help you attain all of your business goal, as I mentioned earlier. Now, if I, or maybe let's put it this way, right? If somebody is actually pushed that into policy and always wondered that the user should be only accessing the app or the data within the environment that has been defined to access, they cannot copy paste onto the personal app. Well, someone may be geeky and could be nasty as well at times and would be smart enough to copy the same data and paste it over the Word document and then try to put it onto the personal storage. That's not allowed either. The only thing that is allowed is work with your Excel, ensure that you're productive, save the data onto the cloud storage where the permissions are actually given. Thus, it gives you multiple layers of protection, by activating the Active Directory premium services, Intune managing the device, ensuring that the application policies are only pushed onto your work profile and not onto your personal profile. Thus, that gives the user more comfortable that they are using their phones, but with two different profiles, so they can be very free about their personal belongings that they have on the phone. Well, in a nutshell, if you encompass the Intune AIP and uh, the data protection applications policies, that gives you more protection from the traditional environment. And moreover, you have, when you go with the higher premium SKUs, you actually get more leverages. When I say, I wouldn't say more, but then since this is coming from the part of the security suite itself, you can still have the Microsoft Defender ATP onto your environment, which is built in cloud. Okay, that gives you uh, the power or the ability to analyze threat and vulnerability and manage the risk. When I say risk management, it's nothing but that actually gives you the insight, and thus you can ensure that you can, with all these offerings, mitigate the risk. Again, well, we're talking about identifying the risk, mitigating it, and leveraging the offerings that are being there within the mobility store itself. Okay, for example, Intune wipe and retire. You have the ability to wipe and restore to the out of box experience. Same thing if you're in an environment that you want to actually move or upgrade to another profile or a phone, you can retire the device, remove the Intune from the device, replace, and then push it back onto another device and hand it over to the user. That makes his life more comfortable. Nowadays, all right, I wouldn't say it's nowadays, but then yeah, it is coming from the native again. The security of the email, the data exchange, all right, that happens back and forth with this new security model and with security in place with ATP and your spam filter and security over HTTPS. This gives you pretty much insight how ADP actually works. For example, if you have an email sent out to somebody that actually contains malicious activity that could may have an you know illegal or illegitimate links, the use of ADP can actually help you identify those malicious activity and can collect the data and ensure that it actually uh, maybe mark it as spam, or maybe it can actually notify you that the email that you have received is not legitimate and the link that is in the attachment is not good to be opened. And thus, it alarms the abnormal behavior and suspicious activity, and can also help you achieve your goal to mitigate the risk. That's what the beauty is about ATP when you have it in your environment along with other security measures. Well, we covered, I would say, a lot of important aspects about the MDM and the conditional access. Let us talk about something, yeah, more secure, less secure. I don't know, but then, yeah, that's what it is. The job of the Azure Information Protection to ensure that you add more locks to your data once undefined basis the criticality of that information. Now, when we talk about applying security, all right, we need to have something in place, some governance, all right, so some framework. Well, we all are aware of the most important framework that is nothing but the open, yeah, the OSI model that actually tells you or educates the industry how they can leverage different appliances to safeguard the data that is actually passing back and forth from the top and to the bottom flow. Now, if someone who is at the network perimeter will always ensure that he needs to actually ensure that his routes, his appliances like network and security are safeguarded, they can actually ensure uh, protect by deactivating or disabling the passive interfaces on the routers itself. Okay, but the modern workplace is all focusing on the application layer itself. That's where is what we need to actually focus. The app layer and the activities that we do are normally on the user friend, and thus this services or the built-in security that the M365 is offering can help you classify the importance of data, label it, and ensure while you're exchanging it. And I tell you from my experience, once you use this AIP, you will find the importance because for somebody who is in the banking environment, all right, their data are pretty confidential, or someone who's actually in the BFIS environment, again, they would need to have their data classified on basis of the importance they can leverage. It's pretty simple, all right? They just have to identify that XYZ email that I'm gonna sending to Mr. Bob or uh, a lady. I can leverage the lock and ensure that the recipient of mine is the person that I'm sending email should be only be able to access this. Guys, I'm not gonna talk about the mechanism, how it is actually working, because that may become pretty tedious to cover the entire technicalities of the function in an 40 minutes webinar, because I would love to do it, but as I explained, we're gonna cover it the next time once we have an engagement done one-on-one. But I wanna show you a few quick things about the CASB. Okay, that is nothing but the cloud app security that gives you the visibility, control, and the threat detection. Okay, let me put it this way. All right, on an on-prem, yeah, I was a system engineer back in the old days. Okay, maybe 7+ years ago. What did we do to manage our users? We had something called dashboard, maybe within the Microsoft tool, or maybe we have invited a third-party app, maybe a CRM that can do the job for us. As I mentioned earlier, inviting more application is nothing but inviting opening of more ports. From the security perspective, it may sound okay to open the ports that has been required, but imagine the kind of attacks in today's era, the DDoS, man in the middle, reconnaissance, and what are we doing? Opening the port so that the attacker can actually mitigate, well, I wouldn't mitigate, but then masquerade the uh, app connectivity and can actually compromise or make that environment go crazy by bombarding with DDoS. So this Cloud App Security will give you the complete insight that can help you discover, assess the risk, control access in real time, protect your information, and detect threats. That's what the goal is. Mind you, guys, you can integrate your third-party applications as well to this dashboard and monitor the behavior and the pattern. Maybe you want to integrate the Azure portal to this portal. At the same time, you can have your SharePoint or the entire applications within the family get connected to the cloud app security portal and manage the behavior. While talking about the security offerings, let's not forget to talk about something, as we all know, about the data loss prevention policy to identify, monitor, and protect the sensitive information. These are the functioning that is there in the industry from good old times that again comes from the same family of rights management system that can be still used to ensure that you discover the data that is of importance, you classify them on basis of the priority, store the classification properties, and then apply it to the environment that has been required. Also, when we talk about using the data store, you can actually ensure and protect the storage by applying the DLP policy. All right, that lets you select the services you want to protect. Maybe your OneDrive, maybe your SharePoint, maybe your Exchange Mail. All right, that gives you the complete control of the data which are at the rest and maybe in the transition as well. Because if your data is in transition, you have your intern and the AIP that can ensure that the data are encrypted while in motion. Guys, with this, we actually come to an end of this event that we tried to cover many of those important aspects of the mobile device management, cloud app security, and the elements that can be used, that encompasses the length and breadth of the security. So guys, if you have any questions, please park it over to the chat box now and I'll be happy to address them all. And if any of the topic that has interested you and you want to deep dive into the technicalities of the conditional access or the Intune or the AIP, I'll be the happiest person on the earth. Looks like the audience is actually pretty much relaxed onto this session now, and they have understood the concepts that we have covered and ready to shout out about the security to the customer base. So with this, I would like to conclude, and you have my contact information. Please get in touch in case you have any questions ahead. Chanakya, back to you. Ram, if you're there, you can take it over, and then I can conclude on my end.
Thank you so much, Subhash. Thank you so much for the lovely presentation. I hope it was a good learning session for all the attendees. Thank you to each and everyone for attending the session. You have Subhash's details. Please don't hesitate to reach out to him or us for any queries. Subhash, thank you so much for your time. Thank you. With that, we
So,
conclude.
yep, thank you guys, and wherever you are, please stay safe. Yeah, thank you very much. Bye for now.